Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. We are in bye week number 1 of Penn State's 2025 football season. The Nittany Lions are 3-0, and they'll come out of this brief break from game action with a big marquee matchup awaiting them September 27th in Beaver Stadium. Whiteout game, top 5 opponent, Oregon, Big Ten opener. Not much more that needs to be said. The Nittany Lions have a lot to figure out, particularly on the offensive side of the football, if they want to live up to their offseason expectations, their internal expectations to pursue a national championship. And as we covered on the post-game podcast on Saturday night in Beaver Stadium, they outscored their 3 non-conference opponents a lot to a little, but there are some key progress report notes on this Penn State football squad. And to break them down and a lot more as we work through these 3-game sample size, we bring in Landon Tengwall, former Nittany Lions offensive lineman, and also the host of Landon Tengwall's college football show. Landon, good to get you back on board to check in on where things stand.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Tyler. Love coming on Lions 24/7. Probably, I don't know, we're into the 30s at this point of appearances by me. So we always have a good time.
Yeah, as we like to say, Landon's been doing this with us for about a decade now, going back to his high school days. Certainly happy to have him on board now with his new career. And Landon, last time we spoke about Penn State in front of cameras with microphones on us, I think it was about 2 weeks out of kickoff in August. I was on your show. Really enjoyed the conversation, but obviously some of the talking points we discussed then have, they've evolved a bit. And so I think we can get into some of those. First things first, though, Landon, overall, 3-0, the way they got there, where is this team versus expectations reality kind of conversation?
Yeah, I think that's been the number one thing. You have a certain chunk of the fans that say, hey, we are 3-0. You talk about how big the wins were as far as the score disparity. And I think a lot of fans say, yeah, you look at the box score and you feel great. And I really don't think any of the worries are about the defense at all. I do think they will get their first real test against what is probably the most explosive offense in college football, in Oregon. At the same time, Oregon hasn't faced a defense like Penn State. So you kind of go back and forth with that. I'm excited to see how that turns out. But the offense, the expectation was that this was going to be the most well-balanced offense since 1994. Not as good as 1994, the best offense ever, but that well-balanced, whereas you can't stop the run. And, hey, I think we got 3 guys in the passing game that can really help us open this thing up. And Luke Reynolds has shown, I think that's been a really big bright spot, has been Luke Reynolds and his emergence. And I think he is going to continue. I think he's going to be the main vocal point of this offense by the time we're at the end of the season, and that's going to keep just building there. But you look at the lack of the run game, and you think, okay, we got the best offensive line in college football, the best running back duo. We are just going to obliterate these first 3 non-conference opponents and rush for 250 apiece easily. And that didn't really happen, especially those first couple games. Finally, against Villanova, I thought the offensive line started to play a lot better. I think this entire time, Kaytron Allen has looked really good, kind of picked up where he left off. The big question mark that we've seen is Nick Singleton. And honestly, I think it's kind of just been, I don't know, it's just kind of been put to the side and no one really noticed because he breaks off some big runs. But Nick Singleton has never really been good in space as far as shaking a tackler or putting a move on someone. That's kind of been his issue his entire career. And I don't know, and now it feels like you're at a point where he's even still struggling with that, but now his vision is struggling. So it's even magnified how much he is struggling to, like I said, make someone miss. I've posted about his elusiveness grading, and I never take PFF for gospel because they don't really know what's going on a lot of times. Franklin has even said that. But you got one running back with an elusiveness grade, Kaytron Allen, of 236, and Nick has a 15. I know that doesn't mean, there's no grading scale for anybody there. I don't even know what the grading scale is. But if someone has a 236 and someone has a 15, and the higher number is good, there's a big difference there. So I don't know what that next step is for Nick. And I think that's why we saw 20 carries to 10 carries. It was 2-1 for Nick against Villanova, because it was, hey, we know what we have in Kaytron. We're confident in him. We need to get Nick carries, and we need to make sure that he is confident in his abilities. And I don't think you test your 4th-year starting running back, so I don't think that was a test. But if it was, I don't think Nick passed with flying colors from the Villanova game. I think there is still some things that really need to be worked out there, because the whole point of this Penn State offense was, yeah, we can pass the ball, but you got the Thunder in Kaytron Allen, and then you got the Lightning in Nick Singleton, and we're missing the Lightning right now. Kaytron Allen is going to be the dude that can grind out those big runs. His hesitation, his ability to wait and see blocks that are going to open up before they even open up is still spectacular. But he can get you a 15-yard run, but you're not getting a 60-yard touchdown run out of Kaytron Allen. That's fine. Like, we know what he is, but we need Nick to be that guy. So I think, number one, that was the biggest kind of question mark, and left fans not as confident as we were coming into the season, because the offensive line didn't look as dominant as we thought, really, as how they left off. And we thought the only guy we're losing is Sal Wormley. And hey, Anthony Donko's going to slide down in there, and we're going to be even better. But it hasn't gotten to that point yet. So I think there is some thought that we're going to, we're staying kind of vanilla and whatnot. But I still think there was a lot of errors, MAs, missed assignments by the offensive lines and the tight ends in the blocking game early on. So hopefully the bye week can provide some time to clean some of that stuff up.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would have issue with Penn State going vanilla for these 3 games, but you've got to execute at a high level while you're going vanilla, right? I mean, we're talking basic stuff here. And I think, Landon, we have a lot of good things to discuss. The team is 3-0. We'll get into some of those, players on the rise and some really positive trends, but people want to hear what's going on with the offense. You're a great guy to dissect this. Let's go back to the fact that Nick Singleton did get those 8 carries on the first possession last game. You talked about the 20-10 difference in carries. I brought up to James Franklin in his post-game press conference that we got to the fourth quarter. Nick Singleton had 20 touches. Kaytron Allen had 6 touches. I said, does this have anything to do with what you told us earlier in the week about Nick Singleton, needing to get his mind right? Is this about trying to do that? He said, no. Game flow, he flat out denied it. But we didn't see Kaytron Allen until the fourth possession of this game, coming off of a 144 career-high performance. And we didn't see him get the ball more than once in the third quarter when Penn State was still searching for some offensive answers. What do you make of maybe psychologically what Penn State is trying to work through right now? And do you buy James Franklin's explanation that this is not correlated with them getting all that early work to Singleton?
It's hard for me to take his answer at face value and accept that he's telling the truth, just because that's never happened. You've never looked at a game like that where the disparity is that big between carries. I think it was very evident to me right away what was happening. Like I said earlier, that we were force feeding Nick Singleton to try to help him gain confidence against an FCS opponent. And it was, hey, Kaytron, like we're good. We're good right now with where we are with you. Let's try to help Nick out here. And I don't know. James Franklin obviously mentioned it 2 weeks ago in his presser, or I guess a week ago now, but that Drew Aller and Nick Singleton clearly have some type of, second guessing themselves, or there's something mentally going on with Nick Singleton and Drew Aller to a degree of where they're not fully confident in their abilities. And I think another reason why fans can get kind of annoyed or upset with that is, why do we have that issue with a 4th-year starting running back and a 3rd-year starting quarterback that, should never have these type of issues? So unfortunately, I don't think we can fully answer that for why they are having these problems, especially you're in year 2 now of an offense that should be fairly explosive. But yeah, that was clearly what was going on. It was, hey, let's get Nick some confidence. And as I said earlier, it wasn't a test, but if it was, I don't think Nick passed the test of feeling good going into Oregon. I guess that's where I'm a little nervous. And I had someone pose me the question the other day, I think it was last night, and they said, would you rather be Oregon or Penn State coming into this game? And I said, well, if I'm a player, I would rather be Penn State, just because you got a bye week, you played easy games, you got no injuries, so that is all very good news. But I'm not all the way confident. If I am really anybody on this offense, I don't care what they say. They're going to obviously say it outwardly to the media and anybody else. Oh, yeah, we're 100% confident. I don't think they are, just because the tape does not lie of what you put on tape. I don't care, as you said earlier, I don't care if it's vanilla. It wasn't executed well. That's just the simple truth. So if I'm Oregon, yeah, I have 4 games in a row, and I went to Illinois and then back to play Oregon State and then back to the East Coast. So I'm traveling, Illinois is not the East Coast, but almost to the East Coast and back 2 times in 14 days. But we'll see how they go against Oregon State, who I think is really bad. They should blow them out. But Oregon's looked explosive. They've looked confident. So if I'm Oregon, I'm saying, hey, I feel good. I feel like I've proved it to myself whether or not we've played really good teams or not, because they haven't necessarily either. I mean, they played some Big Ten opponent, they played Northwestern, but still they've proven they have that confidence. And I think confidence is everything in a game that is, if you don't have confidence, you have nothing. I can tell you that. If I go out as an offensive lineman and I'm like, oh crap, this guy's going to beat me on this pass rush, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to get beat on that pass rush. So that is where I start to struggle. I'm like, hey, if we still don't have confidence, and these guys, the two biggest pieces almost of our offense, are struggling with confidence, it's not time to hit the panic button, but that is a little worrisome, Tyler.
Yeah, put me in that locker room right now because not only are these two guys that have played a lot of football. I mean, Nick Singleton is only trails Saquon Barkley for career touchdowns. There's a dichotomy in place here where Singleton's going to set these records, or he's approaching these records, and yet he's not playing his best football. Drew Aller was announced as a Nike athlete. He's got a lot of things swirling around him right now, nationally, NFL wise. And yet you get to the end of this 3-game sample size. And if you told me these two were sophomores and first-year starters, I'd believe you kind of based on what we saw, because it looks like there's some training wheels in play and the confidence isn't quite there. If you're in that locker room right now and you've got at this point, 11 days until Oregon comes to town, what are you doing with your teammates? How are you trying to help them? How do you approach that situation? Because to me, it's probably the most stark difference between what we projected and what we've seen, because everything was these guys are ready to put their chest out, chase a national championship. And we're watching them play against 40-point underdogs, and they're both scratching their head. The body language hasn't looked great at times. And of course, the production hasn't matched the anticipated production.
Yeah, so I think when you're in the locker room like this, you're pretty much ultra positive, and it is constant, and that's coming from the coaches too, not only the players, but even when you just see someone, you see Drew Aller, Nick Singleton walking down the hallway, you do something to kind of get them up a little bit. I do question, and I've said this, I think to a degree, you need someone that's going up to Nick and Drew and basically saying, hey, these guys can't hold your jock. That's the type of mindset. Sometimes you need someone to say that to you. These guys can't hang with you, and you need someone to give you that type of confidence. And maybe I'm just kind of like spitballing here because I'm not in the locker room anymore. Maybe you need a little bit more of a challenge to Drew of saying, hey, like I need you to step it up. Let's go. Let's see what you can do here. Something, we're going to run some 1s versus 1s on the bye week. That does happen a little bit, especially where we're at right now. We're definitely going to do some 1D versus 1O. So I don't know. You go out, you're doing, 2-minute drill has actually been the number one thing that hasn't been the issue with this offense. But maybe you go out there and you challenge Drew a little bit more. But I do think the number one thing is just, like I said, giving that positive reinforcement to these guys that are both former 5-stars, the highlights of this offense for the past couple years. And now all of a sudden they fall a little bit flat. So I just think you need someone on that offense or offensive staff. And I think it really comes better from a player to go up to Drew and, like I said, kind of give him that talk of, you're that dude. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, and don't think otherwise either. But at the end of the day, it falls on them and their brain. They just have to lock in. And, we talk about LTFI. That's the slogan of the team. That's just what they got to do. So we got the biggest regular season game in a long time. I mean, I'd say last season against Ohio State, that was 1 versus 5. So you could probably say that was up there. Oregon did get pushed back to 6 in the AP, which I thought was kind of interesting. I didn't think they deserved that. I think they deserve the 2 spot more than we do, if you want me to be honest. But so it might not even be a top 5 matchup anymore, which is kind of crazy. But it basically is. I think the understanding of the gravity of what this game means is going to put a lot of pressure on this team. And like you said, you got 11, 12 days to prepare for this thing. Let's kick it into overdrive. I do think we've talked about the vanilla offense. I think, we've seen most of the offense. I'm just telling you guys from a player standpoint, you never go into a season, even if you have easy games, and you don't say, hey, we're only running like 30% of our plays. It's just not really a thing. We could say that maybe we've only seen 80% of the offense, and we have a couple different route concepts that we want to include that we haven't shown yet, or a couple different run game schemes that we haven't put out there. But football is football, and you are who you are with your identity, especially as an offense, and you run the plays that you are going to run the rest of the season, and you make little tweaks. But I think we have seen the majority of what this offense is, and not to say that so far, yeah, it hasn't been great because the execution hasn't been all the way there. If we can take the execution to the next level, sprinkle in a little bit of variety into the offense, then we can, so hopefully, like I said, get after Oregon a little bit. I know we're mainly talking offense right now, but I think if there's anybody that's been vanilla, honestly, it's been Jim Knowles, because we've talked about his blitz packages and how crazy that is, how he disguises coverages, and rightfully so that he's been vanilla, because we're playing a bunch of quarterbacks that are just trying to, run out the clock, snap the clock, the play clock under 10 seconds every single play, run the ball, RPOs, and read options. So Jim Knowles hasn't had to do that, but I think we are going to open it up in this Oregon game, offensively and defensively. As far as the playbook, you are going to see more things. As much as, like I said, I don't think it is, we're just going to see a completely new offense. You're going to see new things that are going to be added that we have been working on.
And just a reminder for our listeners and viewers out there, Landon, 2 years ago, preseason camp 2023, is in the mix with this first team offense. He knows Drew. He knows Nick. He was on the field against Auburn when Nick, as a freshman, was racing down the field for touchdowns on an SEC field. So, Landon, I know that you, just as much as anybody, are kind of scratching your head probably on some of the lack of authoritative play from those two players thus far on the season. On the offensive line, I know that's an area you hold near and dear to your heart. What can you tell us that was not working early on in non-conference play? And why do you feel like Villanova was a positive step forward? Because that was my pickup. I just thought it was a lot cleaner, seemed to be communication in better place. But you played the position. You played with several of these guys. So what did you see?
Yeah, early on, it was number one. I mean, the double team, the combo blocks between two offensive linemen at once. It didn't look physical. It looked like we felt like we were playing lower level opponents and felt like we don't really need to get up for this one. And then on top of that, we were leaving down linemen on block, defensive linemen on block. We were leaving linebackers that were to the side, we call play side, to the side of the play that we were running, and just leaving them on block. Like, there was a lot of communication errors, and I felt that there was not an emphasis on the identity that we built our offense on last year, which was just mauling guys. I mean, talk about the playoffs. We ran the ball at will, and the offensive line was pancaking dudes, was dominant, imposing their will. So we expected that to pick up right where it left off, and it didn't. Now, you come into Villanova, and I don't always want to be the guy to bring things down, but it is an FCS opponent, and at times they really did not line up well. We would do, we'd do tackle over and bring Nolan Rucci over to the left side and, be offset. And Villanova didn't adjust at all. We were able to just push them off the line of scrimmage. But I saw the fire in the guys. I think they felt the challenge of, hey, these first 2 weeks, we have not been what we need to be or what we are expected to be. We are the backbone of this team. And hey, we also, every single time the offensive line walks out of that meeting room, they smack the Joe Moore Award. It's a picture of the Joe Moore Award, which is the trophy that the best offensive line in college football gets awarded to. And that's a goal. And I think, Trout gave them a talk, and there was an understanding this has not been up to the standard of what the Penn State offensive line room is. And so they came out with a little bit of fire, and they were rolling dudes over, and the combo blocks looked better. There was very little missed assignments, which is what we had a lot the first couple of weeks of just leaving guys unblocked. So I think that's big. And as I said, no matter what, even if it is just an FCS opponent, football is once again about that confidence. Confidence is truly everything. It doesn't matter if someone's better than you. If you have all the confidence in the world, you're great. You're in a great place, because that even if you make a mistake, if you keep that confidence, then you're just bouncing back. The number one issue is when you allow a mistake to then get in your head and make you doubt yourself and doubt your technique and doubt the rest of the game as a whole. And so, I know we're talking about the offensive line, but just the offense in general, that was huge for me to see from the run game of, hey, I feel like we can get this done and we can dominate guys. And there was multiple times where the line of scrimmage, say, started on the 50, and the line of scrimmage was reset by every single offensive lineman at the 45-yard line, 5 yards down the field, just moving dudes. So that was a really big positive for me. And then, like I said, just watching Katron Allen slice through that Villanova defense. I mean, it was carries of 8, 13, 18. I mean, there were some big carries there for him. And it was to watch him, how he's so good at setting up the defense of, hey, I'm going to press, even though I know I'm going to cut out left, I'm going to press straight forward, and then boom, cut out. And the defense kind of gets sucked in by that. And now he's got a better angle to get out. So watching him and his understanding of how to manipulate defenses has been great. I said it on my podcast as much, Nick Singleton was amazing. One of my, favorite teammates to play with, checked on me a ton when I was going through my retirement. One of the hardest working guys and just great humans. But just going to be honest, Katron Allen needs to be RB1. I know we're not used to RB1. We're used to 1A and 1B, and it's always been Nick and Katron. It's never even been Katron and Nick. It sounds weird to even say that, but now it needs to, I'm sorry, like, if this can, and if he can get it figured out and get back to what Nick Singleton looked like last year, then yeah, I'm completely fine. But if we continue of where we are at and what we have seen these first 3 weeks, and that's where Nick continues down that path, Katron needs to be the RB1, and it needs to be probably 2-1 in terms of carries for Katron versus Nick.
Nick Singleton around 2.5 yards after contact on average against Villanova. That was his best performance of the year. But that number itself would have been number 12 on his games list last season. He's also a guy that you go back to his freshman year, he was like 4.5 yards after contact. This is really the most indecisive and least productive we've seen Nick Singleton as a rusher since kind of the depths of the Mike Yurcich finale season before he got fired. And when he got fired, all of a sudden Nick found something at the end of the season. I think you remember that late in 2023. And largely carried that into 2024. But right now, Katron Allen looks more decisive, and he's using that athleticism. He had a healthy offseason for the first time in a long time. And I just circling back to a stat on Drew Aller that I gleaned a little bit while going through notes yesterday. 6 of the last 7 games, he's under a 60% completion rating. He was over 60% in all 12 regular season games last year. He was over 65% in 11 of those 12 regular season games. And so you talk about all 4 postseason games last year, the Villanova game and the FIU game, he's under 60%. The one exception was 85% against Nevada. So some strange trends for 2 guys that have started, I think, 31 or 32 games alongside each other, that you thought it was going to be more set it and forget it with Singleton and Aller. It hasn't been to this point. I have 2 words to throw your way on the offensive line. And by the way, 240 yards rushing against Villanova. We don't have to worry about that 2021 Villanova performance. I know 80 rushing yards against Villanova. It had the red flags going up, and it ended up being kind of true because it was a rough season rushing the ball. But when you look at Frank Leonard, those are the 2 names I was going to mention. Because I've been quiet about this for a while, and I love Phil Troutwine. I know you do too. But those guys seem to be just such good supplemental pieces as leaders for that offensive line room and building the culture in recent years. Frank Leonard retired. Great for him. I think he might have popped up helping with some D3 school this fall or something like that. But with him removed, was he maybe some secret sauce in that offensive line room? And he ain't coming back. So what do they need to maybe find in that room if he is kind of a missing ingredient right now?
Yeah, so I'll share this with you about Frank Leonard. So Frank Leonard, when he came in, obviously he was worked with Bill Belichick. I mean, he was all over the place, and he coached Trout down with the St. Louis Rams actually back in the day. So he was there with him, and that was the connection. And so when Frank Leonard came in, he was the old man Italian guy that would just yell, scream, and then come over, and kiss you on the forehead like an old Italian grandfather. And his number one thing that was huge, he came in and was a huge impact of, hey, we are going to get downhill, double teams, and get vertical. And he wanted to run duos inside zone. It's basically the same thing. It's just like 2 different names. That's a whole different argument that the offensive line community, but he was so big on that. And look, his voice, as much as he was an assistant offensive line coach, we all know, lived with James Franklin, rode with them every day. He had an impact on how we called the offense, because he would come out for a while there in 2022. We came out every single first play of the game and ran duo, because it was like, hey, we're going to set the tone, and we're just going to try to maul someone on the first play, get 2 double teams, and let's get vertical. We ran outside zones so well this past offseason, this past playoffs. And we came into the offseason, we're like, hey, it was clear. I showed some of the numbers from the offensive line. And we were about like 40 pounds lighter across the board. I think almost 45 pounds. A big piece of that was Vanga Ioane losing like 25 pounds. But we lost a lot of weight there. And what that told me, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to try to run outside zone to all get out. And we did that. And the problem was, I think, is when you start to get so outside zone, and you get so east and west, and you're like, hey, let's just turn and run to the sideline. And that's what I started to see. And we lost some of that, hey, let's get on some double teams and just physically move someone from point A to point B against their will. And like I said, Frank Leonard was a huge advocate for that. So not to say that he wouldn't have been, in for outside zone and say, you gotta run different schemes. But I think if he was here, he would have said, hey, after week 1, we need to run some duo, some inside zone. Let's get these guys vertical. Let's get them moving. But you don't really necessarily have that voice. Now, what I will tell you is we still ran a lot of outside zone against Villanova. And it's clear that's what we're going to do. We're going to run a ton of that. But we did run a good amount of inside zone, especially early on, and tried to get vertical. So I think there was a realization there. That's what we need to do. But yeah, Frank Leonard, he was like the fire in the room, always was screaming, always brought, so he always say levity. He would always crack a joke and he'd be like, a little levity in the room, huh? And we'd laugh and, it just, but he would get you fired up for before games. I'll never forget this. We're playing like, some bad team, I guess. Who would it be? I think we're playing like Ohio in 2022. And he's walking around and he's screaming and he's, literally he's like, vertical, let's get vertical. Let's move people. Let's be men here. We're going to war. And he goes, and we have in the locker room before games, you have, things to stretch out and roll out. And so we have the foam rollers, right? And we have some weighted foam rollers that are like 50 pounds that are basically metal. He is kicking things around. He's like, let's get freaking vertical, and kicks a weighted foam roller that he thinks is just a normal foam roller. And I just see him go, no, and limps off and just kind of goes back into the coaching office. But I think that just perfectly sums up like the fire that he would constantly bring it. It didn't matter. And then, he walked back out like nothing happened. Like my foot's fine. His foot's probably broken and like just like blue and purple. But that was the fire Frank Leonard brought. So I've had a couple people bring that up to me. I haven't talked about it. But yeah, if you want to be honest, like I don't think it is a huge piece of it. But that was some fire in the room that brought it. And, sometimes it was like, oh, we called him Lenny. It was like, oh, here's Lenny yelling again. But like it had an impact. Like he challenged us. And that's what I was talking about earlier with, giving Drew and Nick like that positive feedback and just always, giving them something good to think about. But sometimes you need someone that says, hey, what are you going to do? Let's put up or shut up and let's see what you're about. And that's kind of how Frank Leonard went about his coaching. And for me, just speaking from my experience, can't speak for everybody else, but it was like, all right, bet, watch this. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you, old man. I'm going to show you what I got. You want to know if I can move someone? Watch this. And I do think you missed some of that without Frank Leonard.
He's a true football lifer, and I'll tell you what, James used to give him a megaphone during those prospect camps, and that was quite a combination. We missed him this summer watching some of those prospect camps. I've just been curious how much he maybe missed in the O-line room. But that's maybe a topic that if they can go out, run the ball, protect Drew against Oregon, we start to put that to the side. We start talking less and less about that kind of stuff. I do want to ask you one more thing on the O-line, Landon, because you were the first one to really mention this to me during the summer about that possibility of Anthony Donko and Nolan Rucci really being locked in as a tandem on the right side. We saw them both start at right tackle last season, have success there. Is that an area where you feel like there's a lot of room for growth through 3 games? And what have you seen in Anthony Donko making his debut as a starting guard alongside Nolan Rucci? And are there any areas of this offensive line, when you talk about the 7 guys they're utilizing, you throw in Cooper Cousins and TJ Shanahan, that you think you'd like to see more of moving forward?
Yeah, so far, and I'll tell you this, Anthony Donko has been a bit underwhelming from what I've seen on tape. Now, I'll say that it is hard coming back from a major knee injury. I came back from shoulder, knee. Like it's not easy because you start to question yourself. That's a reason completely off topic. But I was so impressed that Cam Wallace trusted himself after breaking both of his legs to hurdle someone like that. That told me right away there's no confidence issue for Cam Wallace at all. So talking about Anthony Donko, you come back and you think to yourself naturally, and this is just human nature coming off a major injury. Number one, you might just be a little bit slower for a little while because you're thinking, I don't want to get hurt again. But then there is also in your brain, do I still have it? Do I still have what I had before? Like I said, this is just human nature. This doesn't just have to do with Anthony Donko. There is that second guessing a little bit. Then on top of that, you're moving to a new position from tackle to guard for Donko. Now, yeah, he played guard in the past. And I know because Donko was behind me at guard when he first got there at left guard. He's the 3rd string left guard. I know that Donko prefers to be in space a little bit more and be at tackle. So I think you move him into guard, and he was a people mover at tackle. But the difference is at guard, everything is now. It is right now. That defensive tackle is in your face. It is about maybe 6 inches of space between you and that D tackle. At tackle, you have 3 steps almost every single time before you're touching someone, whether that's pass or that's run. There's just so much more space and time. And so I think a combination of being a little hesitant and then also, like I said, being at a new position that requires now, that's not a great combination for Anthony Donko. So I want to give him a little bit of time to get comfortable because, like I said, new position coming off an injury. I think that's only fair. And I do think he is the best option still at right guard and has been really good in pass pro, but just in run game, I've had some questions of that needs to be a little bit more physical. Talking about, I think everybody else, I've really, been pleased outside of, like I said, the overall, missed assignments early on, but overall been pleased. I would say Nolan Rucci, I think on pass pro has taken a little bit of a step back. There was, allowing some pressures from FCS defensive ends is not ideal for him. I've seen him kind of retreat a little bit too much and give up too much ground for someone that is 6'8.5" and has these ultra long arms. Take the party to the defensive end. Don't kind of retreat, give that soft edge and let your quarterback get hit. So we saw that a couple times this past weekend. So things that you can very much clean up. And also things, like I said, that I think are kind of just like confidence builders. And that's why it's just so important of having that game against Villanova. And I just wanted to see them do well no matter what. I don't care if Villanova didn't come out in good formations to stop us, which they didn't, or that they're an FCS defensive lineman. So we should be able to do well against them. But it was just all about the confidence for me that now going into Oregon, the offensive line has something to build upon. But if I had to give you a couple things that I wouldn't call full-on worries, but just things that I've noticed that aren't great on the offensive line, those are the 2 main things I'd say.
Yeah, so that right side in the spotlight. I will say I think Drew Sheldon is probably playing the best football of his career right now at left tackle, and he's a guy I think that people are kind of sleeping on for what he could do in the NFL draft next spring. But look, there are positives across the field to focus on. Sometimes we get bogged down with the critical stuff right now because Penn State has some things to figure out before the Big Ten opener. I wanted to ask you about those new pass game weapons. You mentioned Luke Reynolds, and he's not new, but he's new in being a focal point kind of player, and that's what he has become. I think he's going to challenge for all Big Ten status. He's probably even ahead of where I thought he would be early in his sophomore year. But what's your early read on those 3 transfer receivers? Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross. We've seen Ross and Pena contribute on special teams. We've seen Pena get some carries out of the backfield as well. I just want to put this stat out there. With Ross and Pena, 4 combined punt returns of 10-plus yards last year in 16 contests. 3 total punt returns of 10-plus yards for Penn State. So you're seeing an impact there, but what are you seeing for the pass game? Because that's what they were brought in for primarily.
Yeah, that's great. One more thing I want to talk about on special teams, too, is the King Mack kickoff return. Hudson blocked 3 guys on that kickoff return for King Mack. They have been huge for special teams, and we know how James Franklin feels about special teams. We haven't had a good return man since our guy Daquan Hardy, Day-Day, so it feels good to have that. I think, to a degree, they've been kind of exactly really what we expected. Ross was banged up, so he's finally starting to come along, but has been the deep threat. Drew, we've seen some good things. Drew hit him right in kind of in the shoulder pad against Villanova on that one deep ball. I would have loved to see him adjust to that a little bit better, but he has been the field stretcher that we at least need the defense to respect. The safeties, hey, we got to back up a little bit. He might run a deep post route and get over top of us. Hudson has been what we expected, the sure-handed guy, not some fantastic route runner, not a ton of speed, but is going to hustle, is going to block for you, is going to be a leader for you since he was a captain at USC. And like I said, someone that Drew can count on. Let me throw that in there to a 50-50 window, and Hudson's going to try to go get it for me. And I think we've seen good things from him so far. Do need to see him against some more Big Ten competition, but love what I've seen out of him up to this point. And then once again, I think Pena was kind of what we expected. Elite route runner, not super fast, but just so crisp in his routes. He talked about Katron Allen setting up the defense to be, then create more space for him. Pena does the same thing with his route running. He says, all right, I'm going to break out. This is an out-breaking route to the left. So I'm going to go straight, and then I'm going to slightly turn in right to try to get that DB to commit right, and then boom, I'm going out left. And you have seen the timing that Pena has with Drew. It looks really good. I think Pena is going to be huge in the slot for us. He's going to continue to evolve and build that rapport with Drew Aller. Obviously, didn't get to get spring ball with Drew. He was the only one that didn't. I think him and Luke Reynolds, I see being the biggest pieces of this passing game. I think everybody will be involved, But I just think Pena just knows how to get so open against man coverage and knows how to really sit in those zones and those little gaps against zone coverage as well. So I've been pleased with what we've seen. Like I said, got to see them against a good defense like Oregon. But everything we've seen from the new wide receivers has been kind of as expected / as advertised.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'd note the context with Devontae Ross. The staff didn't think he'd be available to make his debut until the Oregon game at one point this summer. So for him to actually show up on the field, not just make an impact with some plays on special teams and on offense, but he has kind of reversed the early snap distribution with Liam Clifford. Clifford doubled him up in snaps game 1. Clifford got starts in game 2 and game 3, but it was Ross who doubled Clifford up in snaps. So he's clearly trending in a positive direction. And Landon, we'll talk about the defense because the offense, of course, warrants a lot of attention, but you mentioned you feel like Jim Knowles has been relatively vanilla through the 3 games, and yet they've given up 2 touchdowns, one with 25 seconds to go against Nevada, one with 0 seconds to go against Villanova. In both cases, you had freshmen, third stringers out there. So Jim Knowles, so far, so good, I would say. What are you curious about the next step now that maybe we get to look into his bag of tricks a bit more against an explosive Oregon offense?
Yeah, like you said, you're dealing with one of the best offenses in college football now. And I think you look to the Big Ten championship game last year. What was the biggest problem in that game? Yes, you say speed and us getting killed by Tez Johnson, but where did that come from? It was the fact that Dylan Gabriel had a ton of time in the pocket. That was the one game where Abdul Carter kind of got neutralized. We did not get after Dylan Gabriel. So you come into this game against Oregon this year, I think the formula is kind of similar. If Dante Moore can sit back there and just deal to his really fast young wide receivers. I believe DeCarian, I forget his last name, number 1. They have a true freshman wide receiver. Just came out actually that he got banged up in practice, has some type of hip bruise reported by the Oregon Ducks, like on 3 guys. Seems like he's going to be fine and be fine for our game, but something did kind of pop up with him in practice. That's something to kind of keep an eye on there.
Yeah,
but
that's DeCarian Moore. He's a five-star freshman out of Texas and definitely a name to know.
Yes, he is. He's their burner. Number 1, he is a dude, and they do a lot of quick passes to him, and they try to hit him deep, all that stuff. So seems like he is going to be fine and be out there. So that type of guy, we can't let Dante Moore have 5 seconds in the pocket to let DeCarian Moore run around when you run a 4-2-8 probably, and we have to figure out a way to cover that. So that's my number 1 thing, which leads into those exotic blitzes that Jim Knowles has. Let's see them because, as I said earlier, we haven't had to see them because you're not playing offenses that warrant you to even bring those out. Dante Moore hasn't played in a big game yet. He hasn't been to a hostile environment. I can go back and look at UCLA his freshman year, but it did not go very well. Now, tons of respect for Dante Moore for saying, hey, I'm going to go sit a year behind Dylan Gabriel. I'm going to learn and then know that in 2025, this is my offense at Oregon. But he hasn't been to a Beaver Stadium type environment. Dan Lanning has not been great on the road in his career. So I think, that this is going to be an uphill battle for Oregon. And there's a reason why that Vegas has us. I think we're at like -6.5 right now. I don't always talk a ton of gambling, but Vegas generally knows what they're doing. And I think everybody's saying, oh, I want Oregon with 6.5 points. Well, I think there's a reason why that's set up the way it is. I think Penn State's in a good place, and I think Jim Knowles' defense is a huge reason for that. So you start to mess with him on those blitzes, and Jim Knowles is also known for great coverage disguises. So, how can you mix that up? How can you make Dante Moore think, okay, we're in man coverage with a 1 high safety, and then boom, now we're in zone coverage, covered 2, and I'm throwing to the wrong place, and it's a pick. Those are the type of things that I think you need to, figure out if you're Jim Knowles is how are we going to attack this Oregon offense and not allow them to be that explosive offense that they are known to be. And seems like every year they get guys like DeCarian Moore that those are the type of guys we don't get, Tyler. You don't get those 4-2-8 wide receiver burners from Texas. They don't come out to Penn State.
Well, you know where Tez Johnson was from, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Troy, right? Yeah.
Troy, yeah. And then Devontae Ross makes that move. Obviously, we're not saying he is going to be Tez Johnson, who was very impressive for Oregon after that transfer. And I'll just note, does everyone remember the next game Oregon played after piling points on Penn State in the Big Ten championship? They got boat raced in the Rose Bowl against Jim Knowles and Ohio State. They scored 8 points in the first half. I think Ohio State was up to about 30 points by then. And they scored 15 points through 3 quarters against Jim Knowles' defense. So we'll see what it looks like. New quarterback on that side, some different weapons in place. But Knowles isn't that far removed from taking on a high-octane Oregon offense, and he'll do it again in a couple weeks. When you look across the field, who were some bright spots for you in particular on defense that you want to spend a moment here maybe tipping your cap toward them and saying this guy is trending in a very good direction?
Yeah, I don't even really need to mention it, but Chaz Coleman, we all know that's been fun to watch. He's just developing. I truly believe, especially talking to guys on the offensive line, he is going to be Abdul Carter, Chop Robinson-esque. There's no way around it. That is what he's going to be for Penn State. He's going to get himself a nice, whatever he's making now as a low level, I think maybe 4-star. He's going to get a pay raise this offseason.
He's on his rookie contract, right?
Yeah, he's in like that year 4 basically of the rookie contract where it's like, oh, it's time to pay me. Micah Parsons basically just now, basically. So what else I've seen? I like Xavier Gilliam. I really like what I've seen out of him. Ty Blanding. Now, this is what I'm looking at. That might be the number one thing. Put the Penn State offense aside. We're talking defense. Yeah, I'm looking at Jim Knowles and how he moves guys around and is everybody where they need to be. I am looking at a physical Oregon offensive line that is going to come out, and Ty Blanding and Xavier Gilliam have not faced anything like that yet. Yeah, they've done a really good job, and I've been uber impressed. So I'm big on – I am going to kind of judge you off what I've seen off of your tape, and that's why I'm not big on I'm not going to say what I think you might do. I'm going to talk about what I've seen. I've seen great things from both of them. But now when you have 2 Big Ten offensive linemen that are bigger than anything you've faced, and they're more talented, and they have technique, well, now there's problems that start to arise. How do you handle that? Are you getting moved 3 yards off the ball on that double team, or can you still hold that double team like you did against Nevada? That's something I'm watching there. And then obviously the linebackers, we haven't seen a ton of rotations as far as like younger guys. That's been kind of limited. It is really Amari Campbell, Tony Rojas, and then a good healthy dose of Dom DeLuca in there. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then I'm looking at Amari Campbell too. Had a really good game 1. Kind of iffy game 2, came back, had a great day against Villanova. So now it's, you're a smaller guy, you're 6 foot, 230, 235 pounds. Can you take on those Big Ten offensive linemen like you were doing against Nevada? Because he came up against Nevada and was addressing the offensive line. He was hitting them under their chin strap and then ducking under and going to make the tackle. He's been a great tackler all his career, but now can you take that next step to, like I said, taking on those big guys against this Oregon team? And then I'm looking at King Mack. Really love what I've seen from him. Obviously, it's set him back a ton, the fact that he left Alabama and came back. And we see Anton Belgrave-Shorter's named the starting safety across from Zakee Wheatley. King Mack, the way he's been playing, I think he is fighting his way back to being a starting safety across from Zakee Wheatley instead of ABS. I think there's going to be rotation there, but he brings something to that defense. No one hits as hard as King Mack. I don't think we've had anybody hit as hard as King Mack. I don't know, a while. I mean, Jaquan Brisker hit pretty hard, but I mean, he comes down and it's like, oh my gosh, it just gets me excited. I start like ad-libbing when I'm like, oh, when he comes down and just lays the wood on someone. And that's kind of what you want out of what is essentially your strong safety, that guy that can come down, play in the box, and stick someone. His biggest thing, especially against a team like Oregon, is how is he in coverage? How is he going to react? Is he going to take too much bait? Oregon does a lot of backfield eye candy of motions and all that stuff. Are you able to stay home, read your keys, and do your job? But I think he's been in a great place, obviously impressed with that kickoff return. And I think James Franklin is more than happy to have him back from Alabama.
I'm glad you brought up King Mack, because it's just a unique story in today's college football where you go away to a program like Alabama, come back and openly admit you made a mistake. He's been very candid that he should not have left. He doesn't feel like it was the right move for him now looking back. But then you're told, hey, you're coming off the bench to start the season. And then you're starting by the end of non-conference play. And I think these guys could have a hard time getting him back out of that starting lineup if he continues to play the way he has. Landon, let's finish with this. What, in your opinion, maybe it goes back to that confidence note that you kind of hammered home earlier. What is the biggest X factor going into Big Ten for Penn State that's ultimately going to determine whether or not they live up to those lofty expectations? And we're not taking the blame for those expectations, by the way. Us in the media, they own it. They told us. So, that's the standard that they have set. So how did they get there?
Yeah, for me, it's Drew Aller. I think even if Nick Singleton cannot return to his form, you still have a great offensive line. You still have Katron Allen. So I don't think that is as needed as it is for Drew Aller to just be a guy and come back and be the dude that we've seen in some games. If we can get him to being that USC game, Drew Aller, then we really, really got something. But if he continues to be the Drew Aller for the most part, as there was a great stat that you put out on Twitter and said earlier of his completion percentage is not in a great place right now. And we've seen him just look indecisive, not confident. You see him get frustrated with himself. You can't have that. And not only just for himself, but the offense feeds off of that. You talk about confidence. If your head man, your leader, your quarterback, third-year guy is not confident himself, well, how are you going to look at yourself, especially if you're a wide receiver? It's not great when you're wide receivers naturally. We know how they are. They're kind of divas. That's how it always is. The quarterback's supposed to be the one that's picking up the wide receiver. Hey, come on, you got this. It's all right. I need you to do this next time. You can't really have it the other way around. That starts to get really difficult. So Drew Aller not only needs to take it to the next level himself mentally, but also needs to be a leader for that team. He needs to talk about what it's like for Sean Clifford and having him and just being that emotional guy. Shout out Sean, by the way, with the on the Cincinnati Bengals practice squad, longtime Bengals fan too. So that's great for him. But Sean was so emotional in a good way. Like, it got me so fired up, the way you could feel the fire. And when he would come into the game and say, this is how we're going to do it. Let's go kick some bleep. And it was like, oh yeah, I want to follow that guy to the depths of the earth. Let's do this. But
hey, Landon, the guy before Sean was like that too.
Yeah, and he is back on the roster as well. Not on the roster, on the coaching staff, and he's there. I've heard people say that can Trey squeeze some of that magic onto Drew? Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily just work that way. But I'm hoping Drew can continue to take that step to being the leader. We saw it. We saw the fire, and we talked about this last time I was on. We saw the fire of him against West Virginia a couple years, or last year, and him getting in people's faces. We've seen this fire at different moments, but I just kind of need that all the time from Drew, because that's what the offense needs to feed off of to be one of the best offenses in college football, which we have the ability to do, but we just haven't seen Drew be able to kind of put that all into a nice, pretty box with a bow on top and just deliver it.
Yeah, I'm reminded of something Drew told us last offseason, making that transition to a new offensive coordinator after Mike Yurcich's firing. And he talked about he needs to set the temperature in the room, on the field, not react to the temperature that's being thrown at him. Seems like that's gotten away from him a little bit early this season. Can he regain that? He's going to need to. I think I agree with you. If they want to get to where they go, they can't have the quarterback just being another one of 11. He's got to really stand out among those 11 and help lead the charge. So, Landon, there's always plenty to talk about. You've done a great job. If you're not following Landon Tengwall's college football show over on YouTube, you're making a mistake. Follow him on Twitter as well, because he's got great stuff on a daily basis. Some of it you probably don't want to see coming off these matchups, but it's necessary homework for a lot of us. Landon, keep up the good work. We'll get you back on down the road again, and we'll see what Penn State has in store in Big Ten action.
Thanks so much for having me on, Tyler. I appreciate it, man.
All righty. Great stuff from Landon, as always. We'll come back to you with another episode of this podcast later this week. We'll have a couple new notes because we're going to hear from Penn State coordinators midweek. Also, James Franklin will be speaking after practice on Tuesday. We're going to have Daniel Gallen, Mark Brennan, and Grace Brennan there. I'm actually down at my parents' house in Florida for a few days here with my daughter, so appreciate those guys for doing some heavier lifting back on campus. But a lot coming your way at Lions247.com. Thanks again to Landon Tengwall. I am Tyler Donahue. This has been the Lions 24/7 podcast.